The New York Mets are one of the most followed teams in sports. In that New York media market, with the Yankees across town, the microscope is always on them. The 2021 season was no different. This year, expectations were high. Only 4 teams in Major League Baseball were projected to win more games than the Mets. For most of the season, they looked like they might live up to the hype, but in the end, they wound up 8 games under 500. They were supposed to be the 4th best team in baseball, but they ended up being the 9th best team in the National League alone, 18th overall, sporting the same record as the Angels and the Tigers. Let's take a deep dive into the Mets season and see exactly what went wrong. Before we start, if you can drop this video a like, I'd appreciate it. It helps me out with the YouTube algorithm. The Mets fell off after the wildcard run in 2016. They only won 70 games in 2017, the final season for Terry Collins. Under Mickey Callaway, they won 77 games in 2018 and then 86 in 2019. Despite this improvement, the Mets fired him, hiring Carlos Beltran. Shortly after that, the Astros cheating scandal broke, with Beltran being a major player. The two parted ways. The Mets gave the job to Luis Rojas, who was already a quality control coach with the team. Their instability in the dugout was just a reflection of what was happening in the front office. Steve Cohen bought a majority interest in the team, taking control from the Wilpons. He made changes right away. General manager Brodie Van Wagenen was fired. Jared Porter was brought in. He didn't last long. He was fired after sending inappropriate text to a reporter. Zach Scott took over, and near the end of the 2021 season, he was fired after being arrested for a DWI. So now they have a new owner, a new GM in Billy Epler, and a new manager in Buck Showalter. But I'm getting ahead of myself. 2020 didn't go well. This team finished 10 games over 500 in 2019, but they finished 8 games under 500 in 2020. Their team batting average of .272 was the best in the league. They were 3rd in OPS at .807, but only 7th in runs scored. Offense wasn't their big problem, it was pitching. Noah Syndergaard had Tommy John surgery, but Jacob deGrom was coming off back-to-back Cy Young seasons. He was great once again, a .238 ERA in 12 starts. David Peterson was also solid, with a .344 ERA, but the other starters were terrible. Seth Lugo had an ERA over 5, same with Rick Porcello. Michael Wacha was over 6, and Steven Matz and Robert Gesellman had an ERA over 9. That gave the starting pitching an overall ERA of .537, 3rd worst in the National League. The bullpen wasn't much better at .460, finishing 9th in the league. The Mets needed help, and Jared Porter made his mark in the short time he was there. In January 2021, the Mets made a blockbuster trade with the Indians, landing superstar shortstop Francisco Lindor and starting pitcher Carlos Carrasco. On April 1st, the Mets locked up Lindor with a 10-year, $341 million deal. Lindor bolstered that offense, making the All-Star team in every one of his 4 full seasons, earning MVP votes in each one. Carrasco had been a solid starter for 10 years, his ERA from the low to mid-3s, with the one exception being a bad 2019. Still, he bounced back with a .291 ERA in 2020. Carrasco was just one of many pitchers the Mets brought on for 2021. They signed Taijuan Walker in free agency, brought on relievers Trevor May and Aaron Loup, and they were getting Marcus Stroman back after opting out in 2020. This helped to offset the loss of Michael Wacha, Rick Porcello, and Steven Matz. The team was hoping to get Noah Syndergaard back, but it wouldn't be until later in the season. In addition to Lindor, the Mets also signed Jonathan Villar and Kevin Pillar, helping offset the loss of Yoenis Cespedes, as well as James McCann replacing Wilson Ramos. Right after the 2020 season, the Mets found out they would be without Robinson Cano for a whole year, getting nailed for PEDs a second time. During spring training, Carrasco tore his hamstring, getting placed on the 60-day IL. Despite those setbacks, people were still excited for the Mets, and that 26-34 team in 2020 was given a 90-win projection for 2021. Jacob deGrom failed to win a 3rd straight Cy Young in 2020, but he seemed hell-bent on redemption this year. He started 5 games in April, ending the month with a 0.51 ERA. This ballooned to a 0.71 ERA in May, but he somehow lowered that down to a 0.69 ERA by the end of June. He started to seem human in July, giving up 5 runs over 14 innings, and that ERA finally crested over 1. But it turns out there was a reason for this. Right after the All-Star break, he felt tightness in his forearm and pain in the elbow. What seemed temporary turned out to end his season. When deGrom went down, the Mets had been in first place for pretty much the whole season. They had a 4-game lead at the All-Star break, and they were able to keep the ship afloat through the end of July. I think the climax came on July 31st, a game they were about to lose to the Reds, but Dom Smith tied the game with 2 outs in the 9th, and Brandon Drury walked it off in the 10th. The Mets were 8 games over 500 and 5 games up in first place. This was really no thanks to the offense. They were 3rd to last in the league in runs scored, and if you can believe it, they were better in the second half during the team's collapse, compared to the first half when they lived in first place. Francisco Lindor was a major reason this team was supposed to win 90 games, but he ended April hitting just .182, with an OPS of just .531. He would slowly improve in May and June before going off in July, hitting .333 with an OPS of almost 1,000. Then he got hurt, missed the whole month, and came back ice cold in August, hitting just .160 with an OPS of .440. For the season, he played 125 games, hit .230, and an OPS of .734, all career lows. In order to help the offense, the Mets made a big trade at the deadline for Javier Baez. In his short time with the team, he was awesome. 9 homers, 22 RBI, 5 stolen bases, a .299 average, and an .886 OPS. But he caused a ruckus with the New York media, giving the fans a thumbs down after they were booing him. This was at the end of a 9-19 August when everything was falling apart, so there was a lot of frustration. But overall, Baez helped the offense post better second half numbers. It wasn't just deGrom that was unavailable for the second half. The team also lost David Peterson and Joey Lucchesi to injury. They were looking for arms anywhere they can find them. They traded for 41-year-old Rich Hill from Tampa, and he gave them 12 starts with a solid .384 ERA. Tyler McGill only made 4 starts in the first half, but he was pressed into action in the second half. In 14 starts, he posted a .477 ERA. Carlos Carrasco came back on July 30th, but he went 1-5 over 12 starts, posting a dismal .604 ERA. After the season was over, he came out and said he was pitching with a bone spur in his elbow, something he needs surgery on over the offseason. Carrasco was a disaster in the second half, but nobody fell off worse than Taijuan Walker. He was so good in the first half, he was named to the All-Star team. That .266 ERA ballooned to .713, the opponent's OPS going from .573 to .862, and he only gave up 6 home runs in his first 16 starts, but in those last 13, he gave up 20. He just lost it. As a whole, the staff gave up 3/4 of a run more per game in the second half, giving up 22% more home runs per game, the opponent's average jumping 13 points, and the OPS going up 64 points. I am focusing on the starting pitching because this is really all their fault. Their ERA jumped over 2 runs per game, from 2.98 to 4.99, while the bullpen ERA actually dropped, going from 4.09 to 3.69. Once the Mets unraveled, it fell apart fast. They were 5 games up on July 31st. It only took 6 days for them to fall into a tie with the Phillies. 15 days later, they would be 6 games back and in 3rd place. They dropped as far back as 7.5 games on August 27th, but ran off 6 in a row to pull within 3. On September 12th, they got a 3 home run game from Lindor, taking 2 out of 3 from the Yankees and pulling the record to 500. But that was their last happy moment of the season. They finished 5-13, and any hope they had for any path to the playoffs was gone. From their climax on July 31st, they finished with 21 wins and 37 losses. The bottom line for the 2021 Mets is they were playing with a house of cards. Their offense was so weak all year, but their pitching was keeping them alive. Once their pitching faltered, whether it be from injury by deGrom or poor performance by Walker, and guys like Carrasco not being able to pick up the slack, they had nothing left. Some guys did have good seasons. Brandon Nimmo hit .292 with an on-base percentage over .400. Pete Alonso hit 37 homers, knocked in .94, and posted an OPS of .863. Javi Baez was also good in his half season. Everyone else was about league average or below, and those 636 runs ranked 13th in the league. The pitching staff ended with a .390 ERA, good for 5th in the league, but it wasn't good enough. The Mets have been aggressive over this offseason. They took a huge swing on Max Scherzer, giving him a massive contract at age 37, and he's going to be big for their starting pitching. They couldn't ignore their holes on offense, especially after losing Javier Baez, so they signed Eduardo Escobar, Mark Canha, and Starling Marte. The Mets, once again, have a reason to be optimistic, and they'll be a lot of people's pick to go to the World Series. They just hope to have better luck than this year. Let me know if you have any thoughts on the 2021 Mets. If I missed anything here, tell me in the comments below. Also, let me know what you think is in store for 2022, if they're headed for the playoffs or another year of disappointment. Before you go, don't forget to drop the video a like, and give me a sub for more content just like this. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.